What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 143 of Convos in the Pedicab. I'm here with a really special guest, Scott Horton. He's a host of the Scott Horton Show, Editorial Director of antiwar.com, and the director of the Libertarian Institute. Super excited to have you on. There's a lot of the level of geopolitical conflict that's happening globally, as well as the internal conflict that we're dealing with in America, is pretty historic. And I am worried that it could reach a tipping point. And I'm also worried that certain manufactured events could cause that tipping point to get reached sooner than later. And so I'm really glad that you're here, because we have an actual expert to talk about what these events entail and how to avoid it.
Okay, sure. I mean, it's pretty broad as an introduction. Obviously, to me, the worst crisis. Oh, and I'm sorry. First of all, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, man. You're like, I've seen some of your episodes, like some of your videos. You're debating Bill Kristol, and you're talking to a man on a tricycle. So it's pretty cool that we're doing this.
No, that's cool, man. I'm a cab driver at heart still. So
I love it.
Look, the worst crisis in the world, of course, is in Ukraine, which they act like is some kind of low-level, easy-peasy conflict, and we're weakening the Russians, which is actually just an assertion, not exactly an evidence. In fact, there's lots of reason to believe that the Russian military is getting stronger. And, well, anyway, there's all kinds of political repercussions from the division of Russia from Europe now as part of that. And then, but meanwhile, it could erupt into a real major power conflict between NATO and Russia almost at any time. And I don't want to be too alarmist about that, but then again, I wasn't alarmist enough before the war either. So, there's that. And then in the Pacific, we have a situation where our government is essentially giving a war guarantee to Taiwan, which is a renegade province off the coast of China, which we have no ability to defend at all. And where we used to say that we had this policy that was called strategic ambiguity, that said to the Chinese, listen, we recognize that Taiwan's part of China, but we would like for you to not invade and retake them violently. And then at the same time, they would say to the Taiwanese, listen, we support your autonomy, but don't push your luck and declare independence and start talking tough and get into a fight, because we might not back you up. We may or may not. And so that was a way to try to disincentivize the two from scrapping, and finding a way, recognizing, and this is 50 years ago, Richard Nixon did this 50 years ago, recognizing Taiwan's part of China, but we'd like to see a peaceful reunification. You guys figure it out somehow. And now what we have is Obama really started it, him and Hillary. Trump made it worse, and now Biden has made it much worse in escalating all of our naval activity there and Air Force activity there and in threats against China. And Biden has said, I believe 4 times out loud specifically, we will defend Taiwan. In other words, nullifying strategic ambiguity, giving the Taiwanese more incentive to talk tough, and giving the hawks in China more of a reason to say it's now or never.
Yeah.
And that, of course, could lead very quickly to a real nuclear war, a major power conflict between H-bomb powers.
It also doesn't help that Biden doesn't seem to have any kind of respect amongst renowned leaders in the global stage.
Well, I mean, that may be a silver lining if he doesn't really feel like he can rally people to his leadership.
Well,
if he wants to take on China, he's going to want South Korea and Australia and Japan to be solid behind him. But you're saying, they're not going to be.
No.
So maybe he, at the end of the day, is going to have to pipe down.
Scott, what I mean by that is that because Biden's not really respected very much, and neither is this administration, as anybody with half a brain can see. I mean, we have a president, he falls up the stairs, and that's kind of unprecedented as well. But
I'm just waiting for him to fall down them. Jeez.
That's neither here nor there. But when that happens, and someone like that who nobody respects starts talking tough, it'll almost give a country like China and Russia ammunition to be more aggressive, because now they think that because of who's in office in America, that they actually can get away with what they want to do.
You know what? Maybe, but honestly, I really just look at it the other way around. I mean, and whether we're talking about the Middle East, Eastern Europe, or Eastern Asia, that all of this is provoked by the United States. It's the same with the terror wars. It's the same with the Russians in Ukraine. And it's the same with the situation in Taiwan. All of these are provoked and escalated to the point of crisis by the United States. And then, like the Israelis, they go, oh, boo-hoo, something happened to me. And history began this morning. And my retaliation is all you need to know. And never mind what really started the conflict in the first place. And they always do that. And so I think, the American government likes the narrative that they're kind of holding the world down. And if they were to withdraw, all hell would break loose everywhere. But I just really don't believe that. I think that's actually mostly an excuse. And I'll give you one example is in the Middle East, of course. They say we absolutely must be the dominant hegemonic power over everyone there, or else what'll happen? It'll be the worst civil war between the Sunnis and the Shiites and this and that, right? Except what really happened over there? It was W. Bush that started the Sunni-Shia civil war, which you might call the Riyadh-Tehran civil war. And then it was China when he invaded Iraq in 2003. And it was and I'm skipping a few steps, but just last year, earlier this year, China came in and struck a peace deal between Saudi and Iran. And so we don't really have to be in this competition with each other at all, and canceled the whole damn thing. And that was essentially because America had somewhat withdrawn from the region. Biden had alienated the crown prince Bonesaw there in Saudi Arabia. He's preoccupied with Eastern Europe. And so the Chinese snuck in, and what they do? Well, they made a peace deal in what our government would tell us is a 10,000-year civil war between Sunnis and Shias that we're somehow helping to stop, when really it was the Americans who were facilitating it all along.
Scott, how did he rub the Saudi prince the wrong way?
Well, in the campaign, he said, I'm going to make him a pariah and I'm going to isolate him and all this because I'm mad that he murdered this guy, Jamal Khashoggi, who was the cousin of Adnan Khashoggi, the gun runner from the 1980s Iran-Contra scandal, but who was a sort of kind of dissident within the royal family and who was living in America and writing for the Washington Post when he was abducted in Turkey and murdered and cut into little pieces in some serious gangster thing. And that angered a certain section of the American foreign policy establishment. And Biden, I think what Crown Prince Bonesaw didn't understand was that Biden doesn't mean what he says. You got to look at what his guy tells you off the air later. You know what I mean? He's just talking tough in front of cameras. But I think they kind of really took that seriously. But Biden didn't have another option than Saudi. I mean, that's America's horse in the Middle East, in the Gulf.
Well, we get so much oil from them, too. And then when you're doing all this climate change stuff and you're cutting off domestic oil production, you're kind of like that's a double-edged sword to just hamper the lifestyle and prosperity of people who live here.
Well, and the thing, what it really is we hold control over those oil resources over the heads of our allies and enemies. Because, at times, depending on what the price of oil is and how much shale and fracking we're doing, even, in the Obama years, America was a net exporter of gas and oil. But what it really is it's our friends, the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Australians, they depend on that Middle Eastern oil. The Chinese are rivals. I won't say enemies, they're not, but our government's rivals, certainly in the region, are dependent on it. So our government wants to be able to control those choke points and cut them off, lord it over our friends and our rivals as well. So, I mean, and that's the thing is they'll say war for oil in order to make, your Uncle Bob feel like he's getting something out of this, that, boy, if it wasn't for the wars, the price at the pump would be even higher. But this isn't for us. In fact, if you remember when W. Bush invaded Iraq, the price of oil immediately tripled. The price of a gallon of gas went from 99 cents to $3 in the space of one invasion.
Well, I was still in high school, so I didn't have to worry about that. And I was in New York City, so that was not something I thought of.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Well, that's different.
But I can imagine how furious I'd be, like, just doing this job and driving from, like, Johnson City to go to work, and all of a sudden my gas costs tripled.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be mad.
Well, it's I quit driving a cab for a while over it. I mean, because the cabs at the time were all Crown Victorias, and I went from being able to fill up for $20 a tank to now it's like $35, $40 a tank or more to fill up at night. Like, man, you're cutting way in, especially like during the week when it's slow. On the weekend, it's a little better, but no, it sucked. And anyway, look, here's the bottom line. What we're talking about is America is not supposed to be an empire, but it is anyway, and it sucks at it. And so, we have this policy. You hear Biden talk about the liberal, rules-based world order, right? That's just the American empire.
Well, it's his handlers are the ones talking about that. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
I mean, look, he's been in the Senate for 50 years. He's one of the guys. He has been for a very long time, and this is what he believes in: is that this isn't just cynical, like murder and killing and money stealing. They do believe, and they tell each other, and they all agree that, boy, if it wasn't for us, things would be really bad. And so everything that they do is in the name, supposedly, of making everything fine. And so if the actual international law is underpinned by, say, for example, the UN Charter and treaties that countries sign, well, there's too many other powers have too much say in those policies. But then there's the way we want it to be. That's better. We prefer that. And then so they just do that. So, look, for example, in Europe in the 1990s, when Bill Clinton told the Russians, we're going to build this new thing that I forgot it, the Partnership for Peace, the PFP. And the Partnership for Peace is going to replace NATO. It's going to be a new military organization for security in Europe, sort of like the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, but like kind of beefed up. And you're going to be part of it with us. And it's going to be all good. We're going to relegate NATO to sort of this minor role. And they were lying. That wasn't true. And so the Russians acquiesced to NATO expansion when they brought in, I mean, there wasn't really anything they could do about it anyway, but Yeltsin was like, okay, fine. You're going to bring in Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic in 1999. And then what do they do? 3 weeks later, they launched a war against Serbia to break off Kosovo. And it was totally illegal.
And what was the reason for it?
Well, because
Milosevic was committing genocide, and that was I kind of remember that. But
that was the story.
I was like in grade school, but it was like
yeah.
Milosevic is committing genocide. The war in Bosnia has killed a ton of people, and we got to bring him to his.
That was certainly what they said.
His heels.
Yeah, that was certainly what they said. I mean, they definitely wanted to break Kosovo away from Serbia. Probably the primary reason was just to weaken Serbia. But no, there was certainly no genocide in Kosovo. The whole thing was a complete hoax. But more importantly for our story here is the thing was completely illegal. If you're going to start a war, first of all, you need authorization from Congress, much less a declaration of war. But at least, and in the international law, you need authorization from the UN Security Council. Otherwise, to start a war is the war crime of aggression, and you go to jail for that, or maybe you hang from the neck for that. Well, what did Bill Clinton do? He just goes, well, look, I can't go to the UN Security Council because Russia has a veto there. So I'll just launch the war through NATO. I'll just do it myself. And didn't even go to Congress.
He was able to, yeah, okay.
That's right. And just because he's the ruler of the world empire and the NATO alliance will go along with him. The military will obey his illegal orders. The Republican Congress are as bad or worse than him on it at the time. And, led by, I guess, Dennis Hastert, the child rapist at the time, who had taken over for Newt Gingrich.
He was a speaker?
Dennis Hastert was? Yeah, for
we had
20 years or something.
Pedophile? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. From the late 90s, from after Bill Clinton's failed impeachment in 99, or 98, 99, through, when was he run out of power? Was it during Obama, dude? He was there for all of every one of Bush's crimes. He was there to abet from the speaker's chair. Yeah. I'm telling you.
I feel like the GOP has changed a lot in the past few years.
I don't know about that.
Or I mean, it feels like it.
I'd like to see that. Well, no, look, there's certainly among the voters, there's a change afoot. People have eaten their red pills, as they say.
Yes.
I think what remains to be seen is whether people can really be clued in, and this is our responsibility, my responsibility as a libertarian. I don't know where you stand, but to show people that the solution is liberty. That really, kind of right-wing reaction against all this crazy left stuff that's not the opposite, right? That's the inverse. That's kind of the same thing, just screwing us in a different way. But that's not the answer. The answer is liberty and undoing even their ability. Like, in other words, as bad as Dennis Hastert's crimes are, he's not a threat to the rest of us unless somebody makes him the Speaker of the House of the most powerful government in the world.
But
now we have a real problem, right? So, completely defenestrate the power of the national government, especially, and the state overall, and then take care of these kinds of criminals as the individual problems they are, rather than giving them this kind of apparatus to abuse against everybody else. And so that's the real answer is, now that you don't believe in the government anymore, it's time to stop believing in their power instead of sort of imagining that, like, yeah, one day me and my friends are going to get in there and make it the way we want it to be, because that's not how it is. And what happens is right-wingers and left-wingers, they get quote-unquote red-pilled back and forth as the administrations change. They go, whoa, it's even worse than I thought. And look at what all the liberals went through when Donald Trump came. Oh, my God, it's even worse than I thought. I'm totally red-pilled now. I'm part of the resistance and all this stuff.
Yeah, but then you're doing everything that Hollywood and the and the World Economic Forum and central banks and corporate America are telling you to do.
Which is exactly what all the right-wing anti-government extremists did when George W. Bush came to power in the 2000s. They supported the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security and launching unlimited wars and killing millions of people, torturing people to death.
Well, Scott.
Anything goes as long as it's our guys in there doing it.
Well, to be fair, a lot of those people, like your buddy Bill Kristol, became Democrats in 2020. And a lot of, like, when I was watching the DNC convention back during COVID, a lot of neocon Republican war hawks that were for all of these things, they were not at the Trump event. They were at the Biden event, touting Joe Biden as the way to restore decency to the White House.
I mean, this is how it goes. And look, you got to blame the Republicans for rejecting Ron Paul twice, dude. They nominated John McCain and Mitt Romney when they had Ron Paul. So what did Ron Paul represent? Ron Paul represented a real return to normalcy because, see, the emergency that changed the republic to the empire was the Cold War against the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union fell apart, the empire was supposed to come home, but it didn't because Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton kept it going, and W. Bush kept it going. So then Ron Paul came, and Ron Paul said, no, I will end the empire. I will reinstate the Constitution. I will bring a return to normalcy. And what did the right-wingers say? They said, no, we are busy torturing people to death and pretending to be afraid of radical Islam that's coming to murder all our women folk and all of this complete made-up nonsense that they don't even pretend to believe anymore, by the way. Haven't even pretended to believe in 6 years. That's how fake and stupid it was. But they kept it going, and they rejected a return to normalcy. And then what did we get? When they finally were really red-pilled was after 8 years of Obama, when it was that bad. And then Ron Paul was retired back home, semi-retired. He still does the Liberty Report. And then so who do we have to finally stop the Bushes and the Clintons? None other than Donald Trump. We don't have Ron Paul to return us to normalcy. We have Donald Trump, who is here to wreck them, but who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing at all, right? And by the way, his entire conception of politics is watching the ladies on CNN make fun of him every day and getting emotional about it. And he doesn't care about anything else. He makes every decision based on watching cable TV news, which, as you know, is like the most absolutely surface level of politics. Has nothing to do with real power factions or real decisions being made and what's really going on. And so he's just a complete basket case. And not only that, but of course their reaction against him, framing him for treason with Russia and all the rest of their bullshit for his whole time was like his basket caseness now cubed, right? But then what did that mean? Now I'm leading back to what you were saying. That meant they could sell Joe goddamn Biden, the guy who got us into this mess, the guy who was, along with John McCain and the Bushes and the Clintons, was one of the primary architects of the entire empire that ruined everything. And they brought him in, and they were able to sell him as the return to normalcy, as though normalcy is fucking the George W. Bush years, the Barack Obama years, where we're killing millions of people without cause. This empire, this mad empire on borrowed money going bananas. But compared to Trump, they sold Biden as calm and reasoned and adult-like, and it worked because Trump is that much of a clown.
We had social justice protests to get the guy who wrote the crime bill and helped authorize the Patriot Act and made it so you can't discharge your student loans in bankruptcy court in office. We had BLM, progressive, far-left activists. We got them to all vote for Joe Biden in record numbers, and that's the guy who did all of these things that I mentioned.
Well, look, I mean, what had happened? Look.
And it's because of the type of incompetency that you had in the White House. And, like, look, my opinion.
It is. I mean, look, he oversaw the worst year ever, dude. 2020 was just an absolute catastrophe.
Well, but, Scott, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you got to understand, like, when Donald Trump caused 80% of our money supply to get printed up, and when he gave control of the country to Dr. Fauci and offered him a commendation, when Donald Trump did next to nothing to help quell the riots that were taking place throughout 2020, and when he allowed the election laws to change as a result of COVID, he was doing that because he was just exposing the deep state while he was doing that, Scott. This is 5D chess. I just want you to understand. Yeah. He used to,
I mean, no, again, it's because he's completely incompetent boob is what it is. That's what it is.
Wait, you don't think that he's secretly fighting against the cabal and playing 9,475 D chess like everybody else is saying?
Yeah, boy, from out of power, it sure doesn't look like it. It looks like he got his ass handed to him, right? And by the way, of course, because of partisanship, nobody framed it this way. But you got to think about it. A lot of what was going on with those protests, it wasn't just about police abuse. They were riots against the lockdowns. People have been locked in their homes for months. And this is the one time they're allowed outside and they're allowed to be social with other people, is to go out to the protest. And you remember the TV news was saying explicitly, if you go outside for any other reason, you'll die. But if you go outside for a protest, then it's okay. And people were like, fine. And so they were going outside. It was it was a huge thing. And, you know, a friend of mine pointed out, I guess it was a friend of mine's mom is a psychiatrist. And she pointed out that, look, they're literally chanting, I can't breathe. They're wearing these masks and they're chanting, I can't breathe. Now, that comes from Eric Garner being suffocated to death, right, in Staten Island is where that originally comes from. But still, like, you don't have to be that deep of a Freudian to see these people have been locked in their homes. They're still, even outside in fresh air in the wind, they're forced to wear these masks at these protests. And they're literally chanting, I can't breathe. And a lot of these people that
a lot of these rioters also wanted lockdowns. The people that were rioting in the streets and doing all this stuff also wanted lockdowns to stop the virus from spreading. No. The people, maybe some of the protesters,
but
probably, what I'm talking about, yeah.
But, well, wait, there's protesters, and then there's rioters, and then there's looters, and those are not all the same thing, right? The protesters are out in the daytime.
Yes.
At night, the looters and the rioters, these are just criminals, right? These people have politics,
they don't have political opinions at all. They don't care.
They're not the left. They're just poor people.
They're taking advantage of dude. This is true, yes. Okay,
seriously.
Okay, that is true.
Yeah, so the people who wanted masks are fucking liberals who wouldn't go near a poor person, right? They'll be at 4th and Comal now, but you couldn't have caught them dead here 20 years ago.
They'll put pronouns in their Twitter bio and have a Black Lives Matter sticker outside of their home.
That's right.
Because they want you to think that they're inclusive. Yeah. And they'll go to a protest. They'll go to protest during the daytime. You want to know why, Scott? Because it looks good on Instagram. They can take a selfie. Look, we're with the people.
You know, I can't remember what it was. It was something that like National Lampoon did, where it was like a song. They were like making fun of Joan Baez, talking about how, all the darkies on the other side of the Bay Bridge, they ought to rise up in revolution against the government while she's safe in San Francisco in her little, rich high-rise apartment, and is like going, come on, you guys, revolution from across the bay. Like, you guys get out there.
That you're going to be the person that they revolt against?
Yeah, sure. I memean, this is the difference between a liberal and a leftist. I think we found it. You know what I mean? Or just a liberal and a real person.
But a lot of these, but a lot of these like hardcore left-wing activists, like these leftist activists, for lack of a better word, come from like super rich families. Like a lot of them are trust fund kids playing dress up.
Well, yeah, that's true too. I mean, that's always been the case with with a lot of, white leftists especially, that they are, they're college educated kids who bought into some Marxist crap. And look, here's the thing about it. I'm from Austin, which is in Texas, as you may know, but it's also Austin. And I'm libertarian enough that I can empathize with both sides.
I'm in the same boat, yeah.
Look, it's totally understandable, and it should be, even for right-wingers, it should be understandable why half the people are just born not right-wing, man. They don't trust Christians. They don't trust big business. They don't trust whatever the old thing is, and they figure everything ought to change for the better some goddamn how, and they're in reaction against what they think is the stodgy old conservative way, right? And then it's the same thing on the right, where they think everything's been taken over by the liberals, and they're the last redoubt of reaction, trying to hold on to what was good about the past before it all gets washed away and whatever. They all feel powerless. They all feel like, the other side is the one that's dominant, when, like, who's really dominant? Just look at it. It's all about money. It's all about, the real definition of politics is the battle over who controls the resources, right? It's not about who calls who what pronoun and all this crap. It's about who owns the mine.
Well, it's
who owns the shipyards and who gets to collect those rents.
So Thomas Jefferson said, like, he who can, if I give me control of the central banks and I care not who makes the law.
Yeah, somebody said that's a legit one, but it's good enough. I mean, it makes perfect sense that.
And you talked about the empire too, and you said that our like, we went from a republic to an empire during the Cold War, but I think it went sooner to that, and it dates back to the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Well,
because
the real age of empire was when they stole the Philippines and all that, and Hawaii in the late 1800s. So it was already an empire. And look, Noam Chomsky says there's the saltwater fallacy, like, oh, it's not an empire till you cross the sea. Well, what about conquering everything between, DC and California?
That's Destiny with the
that's imperialism in its own way too, sure, and all in Latin America and all that gets overlooked. So look, America's been an empire all along in a way, but at the same time, here's the thing about it is, well, and you may be very familiar with this. I bet you are. Is at the dawn of the Cold War, you had the National Security Act of 1947, created the CIA, completely reorganized the War Department into the Defense Department and all the different branches, and permanently instituted the national security state. And then, along with the doctrine outlined by Paul Nitze in National Security Council Directive 68, NSC 68, it says, and this is wrong, it's ignorant economics. He goes, America can never be this prosperous country unless we're an evil empire and we steal everything from everybody else. And that's the only way we can get these resources, is by gangsterizing people and shit, which is just wrong. Free market economics does not teach that you need an empire abroad to have capitalism at home.
No, but
it's self-serving bullshit from a Navy strategist, is what it is.
Yeah, but the oligarchs who gave a bunch of money to Hitler so that their companies could thrive in Nazi Germany and so they could play both sides of the war, happened to have their hands in creating these intelligence agencies, and then they brought in these same Nazis to help run these agencies and run our universities and have almost like a shadow-like control over our government. And those same people made statements like that because the United Fruit Company needs to make more money, so we got to go into Indonesia. And if you don't let us go into Indonesia, they're gonna become communist. And then Russia will take over, and then Russia will take over us. And we're doing this for your safety. Do you like living in your house in the suburbs? Those Marines and those soldiers, they're in Indonesia killing brown people for the United Fruit Company. They're doing that, Scott, to keep you safe.
It's the same thing they say every time.
Yeah.
It's the same thing they told everybody 20 years ago and getting the terror war started. It's a real bother to me that by the time they did the war in Libya, they barely bothered lying. I mean, they said Gaddafi was raping every woman and child in the city, whatever. It was just they mailed it in, man. And by Syria, they're like, well, we're helping the good guys. Never you mind the details. By the time of Yemen, they didn't even say anything at all. They didn't say anything at all. The State Department spokeswoman, Bernadette Meehan, put out one little thing going, well, we're helping the Saudis bomb Yemen now. And that was how they inaugurated a 5-year campaign. It's probably the most brutal campaign of all of the terror wars, was the American-backed Saudi and UAE war against Yemen. And nobody even knows about it or cares at all. Nobody even had to take notice at all anymore because we're so used to this now.
I think there's been enough backlash and enough false flags, enough there's been enough of a track record of us lying to get into conflicts that even when this Ukraine thing started, nobody cares. Like, 20 years ago, if this had happened, right, everybody would be supporting Ukraine. If something like this happened 20 years ago, when we had a stronger sense of patriotism, or we had someone like a Bush in office, and we haven't seen like the full-blown economic effects of spending trillions of dollars on these senseless foreign wars, when we have no sound money to back our currency up.
You're so right. So right.
Everybody, the reaction to Russia-Ukraine would have been very similar to 9/11, but because we saw everything and we saw how people got treated during COVID with the lockdowns, the level of support for this war, it's like at an all-time zero minus a few people with Ukrainian flags in their bios who are never going to go and fight in Ukraine.
Right. And look, it really helps that Joe Biden is in charge right now. If you think about like when Obama was in charge and he wanted to escalate the war in Syria, and the American right especially were just like, no, I'm not following Barack Obama in a battle. Forget it. But look.
But who wants to follow Joe Biden in a battle?
Exactly. So
that's good that it's Biden, yeah.
The parallel here would be like, Joe Biden is LBJ to Obama's JFK, right? JFK is like young and handsome and persuasive, and Lyndon Johnson is just this mean old SOB, right? Well, that's how it is with Biden and Obama. If Biden is charismatic and handsome and whatever, and has people really like emotionally attached to him in a way, nobody loves Biden. Nobody's committed to Biden. No one has faith in Biden. People are willing, Democrats are willing to accept him as like, hey, he's better than Trump and these kinds of things. But no one ever was a Bidenian, or you know what I mean? No one ever believed in him or really care about him. And so he is a very poor cheerleader for this conflict, which is very good for us. And especially, I'll go you further. See, is that, look, if he was a lousy Republican, let's say he was Mitt Romney up there, he's still a Republican leading the right on being tough against America's enemies. And I think even as kind of a weak Republican, most Republicans would be like, all right, you know what? It is the big bad Russians. And we are after all.
No, I think at this point, people hate Mitt Romney now on the right too. Bad example. It's got to be somebody else. It's got to be somebody. If maybe Jim Jordan or Chip Roy said that, then maybe. But I think at this point, though, like, no, I think at this point people got so red-pilled about these wars, and people have seen enough people come home from Iraq and Afghanistan all fucked up with a bunch of drug problems with nothing to show for it, that I don't think that the war stuff works anymore. The only time that the war stuff would ever work is two ways, right? One is to defend our border from the migrants. Because, I look at pursuing war in a sense of like, don't advocate for a conflict unless you're willing to be in the thick of it. And the only thing that I'd be willing to possibly be in the thick of is protecting our own border in America.
But you don't need soldiers for that. I mean, you're talking about civilians on foot with no weapons, so you just need cops to.
I don't know. Now when 10,000 people are coming over every single day and it's being overwhelmed, and these are all military-aged men.
Well, what's the soldier going to do? Machine gun them?
No, but I think the presence of that could serve as a deterrent to help with law enforcement.
And then if the deterrent fails, then what? Machine gun them?
Well, that's what cops are for too, right? Like, cops are deterrents, and if the deterrent fails, then
they don't have machine guns.
But they still have guns. They still shoot. Like, it's not that different.
What? Yeah, it is too.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, of course. Look, Bill Clinton put Marines on the border. The first thing they did was murder a kid, a 16-year-old sheep herder named Ezekiel Hernandez in 1995. And he was on the American side of the border with a .22 rifle herding his sheep. And the Marines go, oh, enemy, contact, weapon, rifle, shoot him.
Okay.
Because they're Marines.
And then all it takes is
their job is to destroy an enemy.
Okay. And then all it takes is one or two of those. The media blows up, and then the case for open borders
gets
strong.
That kid had a right to live, man.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I'm not arguing with you.
I'm just saying, never mind the media blowing it up. It's not a good policy.
Well, I'm just talking through it and asking, right?
But I'm just saying that's why. I'm saying Marines are warriors.
I'm not like going in gung-ho saying we better put soldiers on the border and kill up everyone who goes over. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just offering like.
But I'm just saying that's what soldiers are. Soldiers are soldiers. So you can't say, look, I just want to line up a bunch of soldiers, but I don't want them to do soldier shit if it comes down to it. That's their job.
Okay, fair.
Right? So, like, what you want to do is have, even if you gotta, whatever, I don't know, draft the National Guard and put them in civilian clothes and deputize them under the state police or the local sheriff's office in an emergency. I guess you have National Guard, State Guard, and National Guard standing around, as background. But you call out the Army and the Marines and this kind of thing. The purpose of doing that is to kill people, right? You don't want to do that.
No.
What you're talking about is turning them away and letting them know they can't get by. But that can be done without soldiers.
And to be fair, a lot of these people are coming over the border in record numbers because of our foreign policy dating back for 70 plus years.
Immigration policy is completely crazy too, right? There's only one loophole to get in. It's claim asylum. But if you claim asylum, then they have to let you in, and they have to give you all these benefits, and they have to give you this certain leeway until your court and all of this stuff, as opposed to if you're an economic migrant, right? You have to claim that you're fleeing some persecution. Then you can just get in the country and go wherever you want. So the laws are written by a bunch of Republicans and Democrats and make no sense, and then create perverse incentives. And then you have, of course, just like with everything, you always got to ask, well, what did the government do in the first place to make it this way? Like, other than Hillary Clinton helping overthrow the government of Honduras in 2009 and helping a bunch of, drug dealing businessmen, right-wing criminals run the country down there and driving crime up through the roof and creating this whole refugee crisis. And then they created a loophole that said, hey, if you're fleeing a refugee crisis, you can come in. So now we have a gigantic caravan of people trying to come in.
What do these
all of them
gain?
claiming that they're fleeing the violence from Hillary's coup.
Scott, what do these people gain? What do the politicians in Washington and these bureaucrats and the Davos class gain from a flood of immigrants coming in?
Look, I mean, you got to think this through, and I'm not a goddamn communist. I've never been a leftist. I'm not saying that, but that doesn't mean I'm on the side of business, right? I'm on the side of capitalism, the system where I don't care if business goes out of business.
Well, capitalism and corporatism are not the same thing.
That's right. And being loyal to a system or believing in or understanding the efficacy of a system of profit and loss and private property ownership and free exchange is not the same as saying, boy, I really care a lot about the interests of XYZ Corporation, and I hope they do well. I don't give a damn about XYZ Corporation or what they're doing. That's not what I'm doing. So that's a preface to explain that, like, it's just true. Even if you're a right-winger and maybe you own a corporation and you just side for the right and for owners against workers and poorer, people on the other end of the deal on all issues, it's true, and it ain't fair, okay, that what's happening here is, one, as you know and already explained yourself, they locked everything down, and then they created trillions of dollars through this CARES Act of new money in order to flood the economy, to make up for the Great Depression that they had inflicted by just pouring new cash into it to sort of pretend to heal it over. That's what has led to this massive price inflation. And then one of the effects of the monetary inflation causing that price inflation is that there is upward pressure on wages, meaning people who work for you riding pedicabs are saying, boss, I need more per hour here, man, for my base
I don't
pay.
own my company. I just
all right,
own
I'm making up shit.
Cab.
But anyway,
and we also get paid per fare. But yes, I get
you got it, though. So, like, look,
we all charge more now.
Everybody has to charge more. Everybody does, right? But, of course, if you're the owner of the company and you can get out of it, you don't want to have to give your guys a raise.
Juan from Venezuela will work for
that's right.
$7 an hour.
Open the border right up, let in hundreds of thousands and millions of new people, and all you're doing is letting off a pressure valve on that upward pressure on wages, because now that means that all the poorest hourly workers are now competing against other low-skilled or no-skilled brand new labor coming in, and they're relieving those businesses of that pressure. And you know what? I was talking this shit on, and I know it sounds like I'm some class war communist, but it's just true. And what's funny is because leftists are usually open borders, which is totally against their ideology, but
yes, it does,
their shit makes no sense anyway, so you wouldn't expect it to. But I was pointing that out, and almost immediately a guy responded to me with a link and a screenshot to a New York Times article that said, one big great benefit of all this new immigration is it's helping relieve all that upward pressure on wages, which is caused by the inflation, the price inflation, which is caused by the monetary inflation in the CARES Act that you already identified, right? So they caused the problem, and then what's their solution? Whoa, poor people are demanding more money because their cost of living is going up. Instead of giving them a raise, we'll bring in even poorer people to undercut them and fuck them over.
There are also
That's class war
Well,
from the rich against the poor.
Scott. There are also other secondary effects to this too, and you know, I don't want to go fight a war with Russia, but you know, like I said, Juan from Venezuela might go out there if he gets promised citizenship.
Well, there are mercenaries from Latin America, especially Africa, but I believe Latin America are fighting there too. Call it an economic draft, absolutely.
Yeah,
you know,
I would do that, right? Or you know, listen, like the people that are coming in here, they're coming in with to escape extreme poverty, extreme levels of crime. Yeah. Generally speaking, when you come from extreme poverty and you are from an extremely crime-infested area, you're probably going to just be more likely to commit crimes because of these circumstances, right?
Yeah, and also
then they go. And then they travel throughout the whole country, and they go to places like San Francisco or Chicago or even, you know, throughout Texas or throughout the whole country. Mm-hmm. And you combine that with the soft on crime DAs, it lowers property value. It gets businesses to leave. It causes companies like BlackRock to buy up more real estate for cheaper prices.
Sure, man.
And then, you know, it exacerbates the commercial real estate crash. And then, well, you know, the guys at Davos, they're talking about building 15-minute cities to help lower your carbon footprint and help fight climate change. It just seems like a very faster, more expedited way to also build 15-minute cities and get consent for it.
I don't really know about that.
It's a lot.
I mean, I know that that's a thing that they talk about a lot. I don't know that you can connect that directly to the boom and the bust cycle, because the reality is this is just how it always is. You know, in 2008, they didn't mean for Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers to go out of business and cease to exist. You know, I learned later that in 1988, in the crash of 88, N.M. Rothschild went out of business in New York City. Oh, it's in the movie with Matthew McConaughey where they're and DiCaprio where they're the King of Wall Street or whatever. You know the one. Were you selling bonds?
I saw the Wolf of Wall Street, but I don't think
Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay.
Yeah. In that movie, he works for N.M. Rothschild. He just gets a job at N.M. Rothschild right before the crash, and they go out of business. They are completely wiped out. So is that like the global conspiracy want to destroy their own damn bank? Or what happened was that we have this boom bust cycle. All these banks get caught up in it. They're the reason. It's kind of a little hard to explain, but essentially what happens is the banks and the government have a deal where the government legalizes the banks creating new money as long as the banks will spend at least some of that new money buying government debt, right? And keeping the government, you know, keeping demand up for government debt and for their overspending. And then in exchange, the banks get to loan out money that they don't have through their reserve ratios, and knowing that if they crash, that usually at least they'll get a bailout. Not always. So then what happens is, look at what happened in 2008. Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, the Treasury was like, sorry, boys, free market capitalism. And then Goldman Sachs, here's $500 zillion. You want free money? We'll save your bank, because Goldman was in tight with the regime at the moment. Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns were not. But they look at what happened. I mean, they were destroyed. Lehman no longer exists. And you might have considered them like one of the permanent powerhouses of American finance. And what happened was there was a crash and they got caught with their dick out and they got completely destroyed. Because what happens is they inflate and inflate and inflate. And it creates this artificial bubble of prosperity. And everything seems like it's all right, and then everything goes completely to hell. In the common understanding, including what these guys learn in college, in the common understanding, everything is fine until it's bad. And then we got to stimulate it to make it get fine again. That's what they think, but that's not what it is.
Well, then
they build up a big fake bubble, and then the big fake bubble crashes. Then they stimulate another big fake bubble, and then the big fake bubble crashes again. And so if you say that you can connect that to anything, right? Like, I don't know, I might want to buy up a skyscraper at a bargain or like office space at a bargain, but I'm not helping cause the boom and bust. I might just be an investor who thinks like, hey, I see which way the wind is going. Let's wait until these giant firms go bankrupt on all their commercial holdings, which they're going to do. And then let's get in there and scoop them up. And look, you know what, too? And this should be said. all those people in commercial real estate, and we're talking billionaires and zillionaires. We're talking giant firms, right? You think of downtown skyscrapers in every major metropolis in America, right? Where were they during the COVID lockdowns when they were supposed to be spending all of their money that they had made fighting for freedom and fighting to reopen the cities and fighting to stop the regime from closing down the American economy? Where were they? They were sitting at home redoing their deck, taking time off. It was no skin off their nuts. Everybody else got put out of work.
Well, they didn't,
and they were going to get a bailout.
They were buying stock anyway.
That's right. But meanwhile, their workers all went home and never came back again. Right, or the workers who were occupying the space in all those skyscrapers, and all the companies that were leasing the space in those skyscrapers realized they don't have to come back and pay that giant overhead of office space now, that they could keep at least a major portion of their workforce at home and have only the core come. They changed the entire nature of office work in America permanently. Well, what are you going to do with all those skyscrapers now? And I say, look. Honestly, dude, I like mea culpa. I remember literally saying to my friends that, look, like at the end of the day, America is ruled by business. And they're not going to tolerate a lockdown lasting more than a couple of weeks. I mean, you're talking about shutting down everything. You're going to shut down the aluminum plant. You're going to shut down the railroads. You're going to shut down.
But we did tolerate for a pretty long time, Scott.
And boy, was I wrong, because what do? They printed up all this money, and immediately they handed it to big business. First, all of y'all shut up. Here's a bunch of free money, right? But ultimately, what were they doing? They were completely disrupting the fabric of the American economy. I'm glad you mentioned commercial real estate, because you can't fix that. That is a mortal wound. That's like when George Bush gave Baghdad to the Shiites. You can't undo that. It's fucked now. And so I don't know about how it's going to crash in Austin, because there's still huge demand here, partially, again, because of intervention in the economy in California.
Austin is also immune to a lot of stuff. Apparently, it was pretty immune to the financial crisis, too.
Well, in Texas, they never had the liar loans and stuff, because we had a huge residential real estate crash in the 80s from the oil bust in the 80s. And the state legislature really tightened up all the loan laws here. So you can't do all that liar loan bullshit like they were getting away in southern Florida and Las Vegas and all that during the bubble. But also, we have just huge demand of people moving here for all different reasons. And this is a rise in prices that is not due to inflation, but it's just due to increased demand. Although a big part of that is because of Gavin Newsom locking down California and so many people fleeing California and coming here instead during the lockdown regimes.
Speaking of Gavin Newsom, who do you think? Who do you think is going to be president next year?
Dude, it's so much fun to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love going through this in my head. So where do we start? Let's start with the Democrats. So Joe Biden could literally have a stroke and die today, right? He could fall. You said he falls up the stairs.
Upstairs, yeah.
He could fall down the stairs and get really hurt at any time. He could have a stroke at any time.
Well, hold on.
He could call somebody the N-word at any time.
And they'll let it go,
I don't know if they could let that go.
Well, they're calling LL Cool J boy and doing all types of stuff, and
even that. You know what? I did see that clip, but boy, he corrected within a half a second. Right? It didn't linger long, but that still ain't the same as the N-word, man. As bad as that was, and I'm not. If I was LL Cool J, I might not have let it slide. But all I'm saying is, All I'm saying is Joe Biden is a walking disaster area, and it's anyone's guess how he's going to botch it between now and then. Could he possibly squeak it through? I mean, maybe. I could see a world where he ends up holding on to the chair, honestly, and not mentally deteriorating too much worse than where he is right now, and people feeling stuck with him. And, they could still steal it on the margin anyway, not by too much. But
do you think? Okay, hold on. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I got a lot to ramble on this question.
Good.
So
I hope that Gary doesn't tell us to leave soon, because we've been doing this for almost an hour, because this is getting good right now. All right.
I like rambling a lot.
So do you think 2020 was stolen in terms of there being through voter fraud, or do you think it was more like we staged the color revolution throughout 2020 to kind of get Trump out?
Look, I think both, essentially. I think the color revolution thing is a pretty good parallel, especially if if he had won outright, they really had a color-coded revolution planned.
Well, you would have had, they had documents where they were going to like literally.
When they had run,
California was going to create its own country and
That's
stuff
right.
like that.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
all these internally leaked documents that got brought up about that.
And it wasn't even leaked. No, it wasn't even leaked. It was
open.
they
It was
put it.
open.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. They put it in the Washington Post and in the Atlantic. You can read all about it. The plan was they were going to threaten to withhold electors. They were going to do all these things. They had all these plans. The only thing was, and Hillary Clinton herself had given the marching orders, and that was, if Trump wins in a clear landslide, then we just go home with our tail between our legs. But anything but a clear landslide, we fight it and try to overturn it. And they were, again, open about this in the goddamn Washington Post. Okay. So that was the real color-coded revolution.
Yeah,
was
and then
that
they
plan.
called the Trump guys an insurrectionist.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Okay.
But then you're right, too, of what we were talking about before, that like the protest movements there's a great article, if people haven't read it, in Time Magazine.
We didn't steal the election, we fortified it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And where they talk about how they were able to turn these protest groups on and off with the text message campaign. They had them very tightly organized. And
also,
their leaders well
the information on the way the algorithm was on Facebook with different events. So there was one story actually that ABC News published about some black guy who was beaten by the cops while getting arrested, and they said black man beaten by cops while arrested. Lawyers are suing for police brutality and this and that, right? And then Community Notes comes in and he's like, the person that they beat up was resisting arrest, was charged with drug trafficking while having a weapon, and was wanted for and had been arrested for murder. And they community noted it, and all of a sudden it's like, man, could you imagine if they community noted Jacob Blake, or they community noted the George Floyd stuff, or any of these other events that happened? Would there have even been enough steam for these types of protests if Community Notes got in there quicker?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Yes. I don't think that would have made the difference, but I see what you mean, that like they were able to
monopolize
really,
information.
And engineer. Look, not quite monopolize, but they recognize the threat of Twitter, and they move very quick, and Facebook too, and they move very quickly to counteract and co-opt all those, and that's a whole different tangent.
That's the Matt Taibbi. I saw the Taibbi. I was watching that one too. Yeah.
So I mean, there's so much to that. The Matt Taibbi and the censorship industrial complex. Those are your keywords, folks. If you really want to dive into that stuff, it started with the Twitter files, but it's much more than that. They found so much there. But to your question. Okay, first of all, the main ways, well, I don't know, in chronological order maybe? I don't know, main ways. One of the ways that they stole it was by lying about the Hunter Biden laptop and pretending to believe it had been planted by the Russians. And we know now that Anthony Blinken asked James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, to round up all those people and put that fake story out to help Biden. So what they did, the Republicans had an October surprise, and the FBI worked with the Democrats then, and first of all, Clapper rounded up all the CIA spooks. Then they used that as the basis for the FBI to tell all the social media companies to suppress the story and not let anybody talk about it. And they really just suppressed the hell out of it. And they just spread the meaning. Oh, it can't be verified. Oh, it's fake. Oh, it's Russian disinformation. And that worked. So they absolutely crushed the Republicans' October surprise. Which if they had treated that fairly, it would have really made a pretty big difference.
Trump would have won.
I very likely made a difference. Also, remember, everybody knows about the fake kidnapping plot against the governor of Michigan, right? But remember, they debuted that story at the beginning of October 2020. It was another October surprise by the FBI themselves, putting their thumb on the scale of the election. The narrative was these were a bunch of Trump supporters who were plotting to kidnap and murder.
And this was
lady.
Trump, but this was the FBI that was there under Trump. And so it also shows how ineffective he was at actually wielding power and managing these agencies.
Right. Boy, are you right about that. I mean, they completely pwned his ass while he was sitting in the chair. It's unbelievable.
And so the left, I hate using left and right, but we're using that for lack of a better word.
The Democrats in this case,
they all say, oh, well, if Trump gets in office, it's going to destroy democracy, and you're going to get fascism, and you're going to get a strong man ruling everything. And I'm like, well, really, if that's the case, like, I don't know any effective strongman leaders that get manipulated and owned and demolished by the agencies that they're supposed to have control over. Like, that's literally the opposite of fascism.
Look, and I mean, frankly,
you know what I mean? Like,
he doesn't have a doctrine, right? Donald Trump, like you could say he's a little bit of like in a way, some kind of pale imitation of a Buchananite or something like that, but not really, dude. And he's very center left on a lot of things. He doesn't really have a doctrine at all. Remember, they cried about, oh, he had a book of Hitler's speeches on his nightstand, and it's like, yeah, but do you really think he read it? Like, even assuming that's true, let's assume that's true. You really think he picked it up and read it? He doesn't read things.
It's better than us. We give money to actual Nazis to go fight in Ukraine, and then people say this stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
and, look,
and they're applauding Nazis in Canada.
I mean, be honest about, like, just on the basic level, dude, that, like, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and this isn't a partisan thing. I'm not a partisan. Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, those guys read at least articles. I think definitely Bill Clinton reads books. Probably Obama reads books. George W. Bush and Donald Trump, they don't. They're just not interested in knowing shit like that. I'm sure if I need to know, Jimmy will tell me and whatever, and then that's good enough for them, dude. They're not interested in all this, like, academic stuff. I got street smarts. That's W. Bush, you know? And that's how these guys are. Donald Trump doesn't have a doctrine. So for all the people on the liberals and left who are terrified of him, that he represents some kind of fascist cause, he doesn't even know what fascism is. He couldn't define it for you. He doesn't have a plan like, oh, I'm going to put a government bureaucrat on every board of directors, and I'm going to, like, everything within the state and all this Mussolini economic stuff. He doesn't know anything about that. That guy's a real estate tycoon. He doesn't know about agriculture. He doesn't know about arms. He doesn't know about industry, right? He knows about buying and selling his name brand on buildings, man. He's a capitalist, but he's a recipient of loans. He's not a creditor. He's not a real ass, like, ruling class guy. He just is but even then, most of his success comes from just keeping good people around him, which I guess I could say the same, but for whatever I've done. But
well, you know, that and nepotism and inheriting a ton of money from his dad.
And look, I'm not going to deny that he's clever and successful in his way. But I'm just saying, certainly there's no reason for people to fear that what he has in mind is somehow overturning the U.S. constitutional order and replacing it with some right-wing fascist dictatorship with stormtroopers who are loyal only to him and all of this kind of thing. Like, I hate to tell you this. It pains me to let you know that the Justice Department isn't going anywhere, dude. Them and the FBI, we are stuck with them. On the day we die, we'll be like, oh, the FBI still lives. I'm sorry, but Donald Trump can't do anything to make them go away ever. Nor would he want to. Nor would he have an idea of what to do, what to replace them with, any of that. All this stuff is just ridiculous fantasy. And meanwhile, who's a threat to democracy? How about hiring the secret police to frame the other guy for treason with the Kremlin? You know,
that's pretty.
How about that?
So Scott,
how about, as you're saying, rigging the election? We didn't even get to the part where, look, they did change. You did reference. They changed the rules to allow this insane level of harvesting, of sending blank ballots to every address in America, whether anybody ever lived there or not, or God knows what, or if they know who lives there now, and this kind of thing. So the idea that they push that margin, I would not. But let me say one more thing. Wait, let me say one more thing before we change that subject, because I think it's important to note, and I don't want to get you community noted, that
no, I don't care.
The Republicans, Donald Trump's people, got their asses beat in court on every vote rigging issue that they tried to bring up, and that very well could just be because they suck. But they did not win at all. They did not have their act together. They did not make a persuasive case. And it's not just that all the judges were mean and biased against them. It's that they didn't have a good case. They would basically come to court and just say, look, we want you to throw out all these votes because they came in late. And then the judge will be like, well, yeah, but it looks like they just came in late from the black part of town. And they go, yeah, well, we want you to throw them out, Judge. And the judge will be like, well, no.
I mean, they had some testimony that sounded credible.
You got a mosquito on your knee there, man. You got to kill that guy.
They had some. I mean, there was some testimony, Scott, that seemed credible.
Maybe hit and miss here and there. I don't know.
But here's the thing that people are missing out on, right?
Okay.
And it's that whether or not fraud occurred, the fact that there was an acceptable margin of fraud is a testament to how badly this guy communicated and manage the country from within.
In fact, look,
if that makes sense.
Sure. And look, here's the thing too. Regardless of the laptop and the Whitmer plot, which was, again, for people who don't know, the FBI rigged up that whole thing. It's totally fake. But
You can't cheat when it's 60-40.
You know, here's the thing.
Does that-
Somebody told, that's right. That's exactly right. And Trump was told wisely that the Democrats have a big advantage in mail-in voting, especially now with they changed the rules under COVID, and we can see it's Democrat legislatures especially trying to ram this through, and they're trying to create the space for a bunch of
But he
fraud
barely
here.
fought against this when he was...
Well, wait now. Hang on now, because here's what he did. He did fight against it. But here's the thing about him. Is, again, he's a total boob and a lightweight, and he doesn't know anything about the American system, even as President of the United States. He had no plan to do anything about this, and frankly, he had no ability to do anything about this. So what he resorted to doing was just trying to be a bully. So he went out and he spent months, he did talk about it constantly for the entire summer of 20. He said, listen, essentially, don't vote by mail. Voting by mail will give you the cooties. Voting by mail will give you the COVID. Voting by mail will turn you into a gay liberal Democrat. And so don't do it. And all real men turn up at the polls and vote on election day. And mail-in votes are bad, 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 bad. Well, fucking so what, Donald? He can say that for months, but at the end of the day, what difference, as Hillary Clinton might say, what difference does it make that Donald Trump has a big frowny face about mail-in ballots? Because here's the thing, the governors of the 50 states and the secretaries of state of the 50 states, they don't work for him. And he has no effect on their law at all. And bullying them doesn't get him anything. And so what did he do? He spent the whole damn summer saying, one, I heard somewhere mail-in votes are bad.
Yeah, there's better ways to check that.
Mail-in votes are bad. Don't do it. Don't do
Yeah,
it. But
I
wait, hang on one second.
right.
And I'm sorry I ramble on, but I got a lot about this. He went to Florida, and Ron DeSantis said to him, don't say that. We win by mail in Florida, the GOP. We win by mail in Florida. Don't say that. And you know what Trump goes? Trump goes, I mean, in Florida, it's okay. In Florida, vote by mail. But everywhere else, it'll give you the AIDS.
Yeah.
Right? And so then what happened? He suppressed his own vote by like what?
Kerry
3 or 5% across the whole damn country.
Kerry Lake did the same thing, and then a bunch of machines malfunctioned in Arizona. But
I don't know about them. I don't know about her, but wait, stay on Trump for a minute here.
Right.
Hey, hang on.
Well, I feel like it's similar. They're kind of like...
I just don't know about that though, okay? But I know that what Trump did was he had no plan to make up for what was happening here with these votes. He wanted to somehow stigmatize mail-in ballots, but then he had nothing but question marks, right? What he should have done, these fucking guys, what he should have done,
they voted for Biden.
if he just wasn't such an asshole, right? If he just wasn't in his heart a bully, what he would have done instead of saying mail-in votes are bad, is he would have gone out there and he said, listen, they may have the advantage of mail-in votes, but we're going to try real hard. And you make sure that your cousin Jimmy and your Aunt Mabel and everybody who may not be able. And by the way, who's afraid of the germ in 2020? Old people, rich people who skew Republican voters. They're the ones who are afraid to go to the polls. So all he had to do was spend the summer being positive about it and saying the Democrats think they're going to screw us on the mail-ins. But let me tell you, we're going to beat them in person on Election Day, and we're going to beat them by the mail-in ballots.
And here's how to check to see if your vote got counted.
That's right, and build the whole thing up positively as he could. You know,
Scott, how do you feel about DeSantis?
I do not like him at all. I don't believe in him at all. I have plenty of positive things to say about him being less worse than almost everyone in Florida on the germ and on a lot of things. Even where he sticks it to the leftists on the culture war stuff. Like, I'm really more libertarian than that. But I really hate the leftists on the culture war stuff right now, so fuck them. And I kind of root for him. I troll
councils and meetings and do all types of stuff like that.
So I mean, I'm rooting for him in a way. But I mean, the thing is, first of all, and this matters. It's a test of character.
I want Kennedy.
It's a test of character, but it's just also a test of policy that he's just horrible on Israel. He's the worst panderer before the Likud. And that means that he has no morals at all. That means he stabbed his mama in the back. Dude, he went to Israel twice and signed laws while he was in Israel restricting the free speech of people in Florida
to
criticize Israel on college campuses or he calls any criticism of Israel hate speech if combined with any other misdemeanor like loitering and protesting Israel. I mean, this is some crazy shit. He's a traitor to America is what he really is. And fuck him. And you know what, too? He was a Navy SEAL lawyer advising the Marines while we all know they were committing, the Navy SEALs, while they were working during the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, in the fall of 2004, or might have been the spring, in one of the battles of Fallujah in 2004, while they were committing war crimes. And he's credibly accused, although it's not proven, but he's credibly accused by 2 guys from Guantanamo Bay, prisoners from Guantanamo, of standing there and approving while they're being force-fed with fucking rubber tubes up their nose when they're on their hunger strike, which was not like, oh, I went to the hospital and they fed me Ensure at the hospital. It's not like that. It's Guantanamo Bay torture prison where they cram a giant thing up your nose covered in the blood and snot of the guy next to you that they just pulled it out of his face.
Okay. Was that proven? I've heard that allegation.
I did. No, it's not proven. But there are 2 guys who claim it's true. And he should have to answer for it.
He should at least be able to address those questions.
And
right?
look, and here's the thing about it. Wait, here's the other thing about it. He's been asked about Guantanamo, and he is absolutely as unrepentant as George W. Bush. He's like, let me tell you about Guantanamo, right? Guantanamo's just fine. And the lady goes, well, but what about the 3 guys that died? And you were accused of being there that night. The Washington Post says you were there that night when you were a JAG lawyer and the 3 guys were killed by the CIA. And he goes, oh, no, those guys all killed themselves by starving themselves to death to make us look bad. Oh, really? They died by having rags stuffed down their throat. They're murdered by the CIA at Camp Penny Lane, or Camp No, they called it. And he was one of the guys who was a lawyer that night covering it up, at least according to the Washington Post. And his only answer to that is, yeah. And then he comes up with a completely alternative lie about how they died because he doesn't even know what the fuck he's talking about. So, and he's completely unrepentant. Look, there's a lot of guys who went to Iraq and back who came back and go, man, I learned some bitter truths about life and death and politics and friendship and things like that there. Nuh-uh, not this guy. DeSantis is like, yep, I'm a hero veteran of Iraq War too, I tell ya. Went to Guantanamo too. Served my country, I did. Fuck him, dude. He's a piece of shit. He is a piece of shit. Dude, he went to Israel and signed a law.
Scott, we've already gotten that.
Okay,
all right.
That's a good one.
In the Republican primary, we're in the Republican primary considering everything that's happened: the COVID tyranny, the censorship regime, the obvious politicization of the justice system, the threat of central bank digital currencies, and the crisis at the border. Out of all of the Republican candidates that are running, I probably will trust him the best to address these issues compared to anybody else that's running in that field. Although I do like Kennedy the best as an actual candidate.
Yeah, well, I can't vouch for any of these guys at all, man. You know?
Not even Kennedy?
No, again, look, I'm not a single issue Israel guy, and Kennedy has a lot of great qualities. But his absolute cravenness before the Israel lobby, in the way that he just absolutely trashed and lied about innocent people to try to cover his flank was the most ridiculous and embarrassing thing in the world. You know, he goes, hey, Roger Waters is a great guy. And the Israel lobby goes, no, we hate Roger Waters. And he goes, oh, no, I also hate Roger Waters. He's a terrible anti-Semite. And everybody's like, what? But then...
Wait, and then not talking to Blumenthal?
Then a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of weeks later, he was at a dinner and somebody surreptitiously filmed them on their camera phone. And he was... I don't know exactly the particulars. Maybe he was taken out of context, but it doesn't matter. He was speculating that Ashkenazi Jews were somehow immune from the COVID germ and that maybe it was engineered to be that way. And at least that was how it came out in the New York Post. I'm sure they twisted it slightly. And yes, he referred to some study about who gets infected with the thing. But what happened? The Israel lobby came after him and they go, oh, you vicious anti-Semite. And what did he do? He goes, no. It's like 1984 when Winston Smith goes, no, get Julia, not me, it's Julia. And he throws his girlfriend under the bus, you know? Let the rats eat her face, not mine. He goes, it's Ilhan Omar, that black woman. She's the real racist because 2 years ago or something, she made that crack about it's all about the Benjamins, which clearly it is. Guess what? AIPAC raises $250 million a year that they spend on American politics. Of course it's all about the Benjamins, dude. And she's not a racist at all. Give me a break. That whole thing was stupid. Not that I'm a fan of hers, but that's who he picks to throw under the bus. I'm not a racist. He throws her under the bus, and then he throws all the Palestinians under the bus. And he says, oh, the Palestinians had every chance in the world to have their own independent state. Liar. And then he goes, oh, the Palestinian Authority, they're the worst terrorists in the world. They have a bounty out to kill every Jew anywhere in the world. First of all, dude, that's Al-Qaeda, not the fucking Palestinian Authority. Sorry, George W. Bush's Palestinian Authority that the USA created and financed and trained.
I went to one of, and we gotta wrap up in a second. We gotta wrap up in a second. But I went to one of RFK's events, and he kind of addressed it and brought up the fact that he kind of brought up something a little bit similar when we were at the rally, saying that like the Palestinian people are nothing like Al Qaeda and this and that, and he was pretty clear about that when asked the question.
So you're saying he was trying to climb down from that a bit?
A little bit. But anyway, Scott,
that shit was so insane.
Scott, 2 questions before we go. All right, and this is a very short answer. All right, one, if you had to vote in this election, who would you pick?
Almost certainly whoever the Libertarian candidate is.
Okay. All right. Who do you think will win? Betting man.
Who do I think will win right now?
Who do you have winning right now?
Oh, man.
5 seconds. 5,
Donald
4.
Trump.
You think Trump's actually going to win?
I think he might win from jail. I fucking do. Look at how weak his opposition is, dude. They are so
They might bring in Newsom. They might bring in Gavin Newsom with these indictments. That's what it looks like. Yeah. But anyway.
And I'm not endorsing Trump. I'm not a Trump guy. I never have been.
I'm going to bet. If I had to bet money, I'm probably betting on Newsom. I think that's the best chance for a positive return on investment.
You know what? I could see them trying very hard to push him, but I don't know if it'll take.
You see him at the RNC events,
bro. Democrats really do love being told what to do these days. So yeah, it could be.
Yeah. Anyway, Scott, how do we get a hold of you?
I'm at scotthorton.org. I got 6,000 interviews going back to 2003. I'm the editorial director at antiwar.com. We got all the bad news for you there every day. And I got a great crew of guys, writers, and we're publishing a ton of books and everything at libertarianinstitute.org. And here's mine. I wrote this one about the terror wars, Enough Already. And this one is called Fool's Errand, about the war in Afghanistan. And right now I'm working on one called Provoked, about the new Cold War with Russia and the war in Ukraine.
Amazing. I'm so excited. Scott, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. You went from debating Bill Kristol to talking to a man on a tricycle, so it really means a lot. I love it.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. I really hope you come back at some point because this is awesome.
Cool, man.
All right.
Yeah.